Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Into Cinema, the show where we discuss movies, new and old, that you may not have seen or analyzed before. I'm Kevin.
You know, that's just like your opinion, man.
Wow.
I'm Tiffany.
Whoa, dream big.
McLaughlin.
And I'm Cassie.
Clever girl.
Ballschmidt.
Just quoting Jurassic Park for the third time in a row.
I absolutely adore that movie, and I'm very excited that you guys caught on. I wasn't sure how long it was going to take for you guys to realize what I was doing. I guess, Kevin, since you edit the episodes, you probably would have realized fairly quickly.
Or maybe I was the clever girl all along. Whoa!
Really, I've been saying different quotes this whole time, and you've just been replacing them with Jurassic Park, since you know how much I love that movie.
Ooh, it's a conspiracy theory. The audience will never know. However, if you splice it all together, you get the whole Jurassic Park movie. So there you go.
I'm thinking about the long game, guys. You got to think long term.
What is it going to be like 300 episodes down the road?
I know. Since we're only doing this, at least at this point, every other week, I'm set for like the next decade.
Nice. It's like the MCU, like how Disney plans the MCU, but it's like your movie quotes for each episode.
Exactly.
But speaking of the long game, we're actually going to be talking about a form of that. This is a podcast about not only analyzing movies, but how the production process works and what it's like to make movies. And it's a long process. Today in particular, we're discussing the production process and the 5 stages of making a film. So they have the 5 stages is development, pre-production, production, post-production, and distribution. And we'll be going through it one at a time. But before we dive in, Cassie, Tiffany, do you have anything to say before we go into details?
I think one of the reasons why I love film is because I love each of these processes so much. And like that's why I love doing AD and producing work, is because I get to have my grubby little fingers in everything from beginning to end.
Every piece of the pie. In
it's
every
fun.
Pie
It's all connected, man. Like what you do in pre-production vastly affects how your project ends, and like every step along the way is desperately important to the outcome of the project. So This is fun. This is good stuff.
It's been really interesting to work in the industry post-college and like learn about all of these stages like in depth that I didn't really learn necessarily totally at school. So I'm like really excited to talk about what I've learned while working and stuff. Right.
And Cassie, you're part of the DGA, the Directors Guild of America. So you have like a lot of professional experience in the process as well, if I'm correct.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely being part of the DGA is definitely I guess a show of that I have experience in it.
The certification.
Yeah, it's a way for people to know, but yeah, I've done everything from like producing and assistant directing. I've worked in animation. I've worked in like VFX. I worked for a production house / agency before. I'm currently doing the freelance thing, so I feel like I've kind of touched a lot of different aspects of it. When I started in the industry, I started in G&E and did a little bit of camera stuff and worked for a rental house. So again, I feel like I've kind of had my grubby little fingers all up in a bunch of these different aspects.
Yeah, and in case our listeners don't know, G&E stands for Grip and Electric. So usually in the big movies, they're 2 separate things, but on indie movies, they're kind of like the same. They could be like a joint department. And so, yeah, whenever someone's like, oh, you're wrong about this, you can just hold up your DGA card. You're like, excuse me, do you know who I am?
I'm not going to lie. I have my DGA card in front of my driver's license because it makes me happy to see that when I open my wallet. Like, I worked really hard for this. It makes me very excited.
I'm just looking at the link you just sent.
The link I just sent is, I've actually run some workshops before, and this is actually, I've used this for workshops, but I actually used this when I was working for the animation studio. It was really a production studio. They brought me on because they were doing more live action stuff too.
Nice.
And so this is a breakdown that I've already made for our clients on how the process works. So I was like, I can just also share this.
Yeah. Do we want to share this on the show, like in a link in the description?
Yeah, we can do a PDF version of this if we want.
So yeah, if you look in the description, there should be something there for you to click on and follow along. The live action workflow. That's what the document I'm currently looking at. So yeah, so I see here you have it broken into 3 sections. So I mean, like, which is, it's 5 or so the first 2, development and pre-production, are more or less the same thing, especially in an indie film. I know in the grander Hollywood movie industry, it's a bit more separated. But it still starts with an idea and conceptualizing it, and then writing the script, and then pitching the idea around, and finding, and then creating a mood board and storyboard and all that stuff. Tiffany, did you want to add anything to that for development?
Yeah, like, because I didn't really understand what the development stage was while I was actually in school, because like I said before, they didn't really like teach us what that was. I had to like learn myself, and it's such a vital stage, because your film can either be born in development or it can like quickly die in development and just not even make it to pre-production. So I think it's just a very interesting, very important stage that people need to think about, especially when you're making indie films too. Like, people don't realize, like, you have to, in development is where everything is like planned out to a point, and like where you have to absolutely think of everything.
Yeah.
Like how everything's going to play out all the way down to distribution after post-production. But yeah. And
especially on an indie film, development is the phase that you're working for free if it's your story idea. So you're like, you have the idea, you write a draft of script, and then you're trying to figure out what you need financially to make the film a possibility. And this is like, this is before the money even comes in.
Yeah, it's whether or not someone's even interested in making your script or even like reading it. And then if they do, it's you kind of just go through many meetings and many like motions of, getting this thing kicked off, sending it to studios, getting your script looked at basically, and then a room of people deciding whether or not they think it's worth being made. Is there an audience for it? Is there a demographic? Will it succeed? Do they think it's worth putting millions of dollars into, or who you like want in the film and all that stuff. So,
and if we're talking real indie, it's when you're looking around for investors, you're just begging for money, essentially.
Yeah, basically.
You have to. So I know there. Yeah, but you also, like we talked about, you have to talk about think about distribution as well. One method I've been hearing about that I'm currently pre-production supervisor. I don't know. I'm like wearing multiple hats on this set. It's we are talking to distributors first, pitching the idea of them. We have a Sizzle Reel, which is basically like a teaser trailer of what the film would look like, a proof of concept. And we show them the proof of concept, or have them read the script or the synopsis. And then we get a quote from the distributor of how much they think the movie will make. And then we take that quote and bring it to investors and be like, hey, I have this movie I'm trying to finance. If you were to give me this much money, this is the percentage you would get back, so on and so forth, according to distributors. And that's one method of going about it. Cassie, did you have anything you wanted to speak about development?
Yeah, I definitely agree kind of with what you guys are saying of it's a very important, and it definitely looks different depending on what kind of project you're working on. Kind of like what you're saying, Kevin. Like it looks very different if you're doing it through a studio or if you are doing it as an indie on your own. If you're doing it through a studio, or even if you're doing it as a commercial client situation, which we'll talk less about, but still relevant. Like they have a lot more of a say in how that script is developed. And like, unlike an indie where it's more of, you have a little bit more control over it if you're kind of developing it. But as soon as you bring it to a studio, they're like, you got to start pushing things past the studio, and they're going to have opinions.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of
what you're going to do.
That's one beauty of like an independent movie, producing your own movie, is that the only limit is your own imagination and also safety requirements. But that's another story.
It's definitely a good place to start out if you're looking to become more of an auteur.
Auteur theory.
Definitely.
What a thing.
Yeah, definitely a thing we'll cover at some point.
But yeah, so I see, Cassie, in your notes, you have the pre-production meeting, the idea concept, the script, the mood board, the style frames, the storyboard, animatic, shot list. And so this is now we're leading more really into pre-production, which is now you have the green light to start making your idea a reality. You're starting to plan things. If you're going through a studio process, you might have money to actually travel around to locations to scout them out. You might have a budget quote, so you might be able to figure out how much you can pay people to work on your movie. You start talking to actors, you start looking into equipment to rent or buy, and all that jazz. Cassie, did you want to speak on this a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, this is the part where it becomes highly collaborative, right? So development is kind of more of an isolated situation, like very small sets of people. Pre-production is when it starts to get real. Like you're working with the cinematographer as you start to build your storyboard. And I've seen even in live action that they use animatics too, of like timing out to see what it's going to feel like. And then as soon as you hit shot lists, again, you're working with your cinematographer and also hopefully your AD as well. Hopefully we can hope to develop like how many shots are you going to have for this? What kind of shots are you going to need? Because as you start building these storyboards and shot lists, that helps determine, all right, if I want to do this, this camera movement, what piece of equipment do I need in order to achieve that? And you start thinking about your budget too of like, well, I'd really like for it to be, this ginormous jib shot, but we don't quite have that budget. So what if instead I turn it into a dolly shot, where instead you're on a track a little lower? How do you best serve the story while staying in budget? There's a lot of people who say fix it in post, and it makes me cry inside every time.
Yeah.
Whenever get it right, you shoot your movie right the first time. Your editor cannot fix everything. Star Wars is a miracle that it happened.
Fix it in pre. This is where you will spend most of your production time in pre-production, and it's important to know that like I would say probably 60% of your time is spent in pre-production.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of time spent in pre-production, and it's very important. So that because that way when the actual production happens, you really know what you're supposed to do. So you're just boom, 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 getting things done.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 60% is spent in pre-production. Maybe 25% is spent actually shooting the project, like actually shooting. And then the other chunk is post-production. And obviously these kind of can adjust and change based off of what kind of project you're doing. Because obviously a project that is doing more VFX heavy, like a sci-fi show, is going to need more time on the post-production end. Or if you're a sci-fi show like The Mandalorian, you're actually spending more time in pre-production because they have to build all of those visual effects before you shoot.
It's pretty cool how Mandalorian handles its production process.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. We'll have to do a breakdown of The Mandalorian.
I can talk about how cinema has come full circle.
Yeah, from all practical to nothing in the to green screen, back to like, pretty much practical again.
Yeah, exactly. Backwards projection is back, baby.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff. We'll do an episode on Mandalorian. Faux show.
How about you, Tiffany? Any notes on you for pre-production?
Yeah, I've only been in the pre-production stage on like student films and like one like feature film that I worked on, and I don't know, it's a really, you don't really realize how important pre-production is until you're like a part of it, and how much work and dedication actually goes into it. And it's I always joke, I'm like, it's a wonder films get made at all, because if pre-production fails, like the rest of production will fail. And I've seen that, like I've heard so many horror stories and stuff like that. It's so important that everybody is on top of everything during pre-production, and you just have to make sure you have a good team that's like passionate about what they're doing in order for production to run smoothly, because there's so many things that can go wrong in production, and everybody just thinks you show up to set. Everybody thinks you just show up to set one day and everything's there for you. It's like, no, it's all planned out by a group of people, and it's planned out to the T. The schedule has changed 400 times before you even stepped foot onto set, before you even got that call sheet the night before. So it's really, it is kind of like magic in a way. And people don't really think of it that way.
Yeah, it's so I've worked pre-production more recently than I have before. There's a short film that I'm a producer on that I started off as a location scout, then got bumped up to producer because of how much connections I was making and providing for the film. So yeah, locking down locations, talking to realtors and property owners, having them sign contracts, finding a truck, having them sign a contract to rent the truck from them. And then, figuring out the logistics of the shoot schedules. Like, okay, well, like, since I'm local to the area, I know where everything's at. Here's the best route we should do for our locations. And then that way we schedule around that. And I planned everything out to the T, but then unfortunately the director got tested positive for COVID right before the shoot, so we had to cancel it. So we had to push that further down. So that's still in the process. I'm still attached to producer. We're shooting that later this year. Then also I've been attached. There's a horror film I'm attached to that's shooting in August, that I am basically second in command for. I've been part of story development since the beginning, and then helping with the logistics of planning the schedule and the budget and all that stuff. So that's been going on for a while, since essentially like summer last year. So then we plan to shoot in August this year. So that's almost a full year I've been working on that shoot. And then also I just got pulled onto as a location manager for a film that's shooting in October. So that once again, it's a long time that's going to happen. And for reference, we're recording this in April, so it's very far out for pre-production.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a long time.
On that note, before we go into production, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Starting a podcast? Try a Podbean Unlimited hosting plan. It's what we use here at Committed Critics, giving us the opportunity to have our show on Pandora, iHeartRadio, and even Spotify. You can get your first month of unlimited hosting for free on us by going to podbean.com/committedcrits, just like our Twitter, or by clicking the link in the description. Podbean, the easiest, most affordable option to get started in podcasting. And welcome back to Breaking Into Cinema. Today we're talking about the film production process, the 5 stages: the development, the pre-production, production, post-production, distribution. If you listen to the first half of the episode, you know that we talked about development and pre-production. Now we're going to dive into production, which is probably the shortest part of making a movie, believe it or not. It is So now we've developed, we have the idea, we planned everything out, we know exactly what we need. We have our team, we have our money, we have our locations, we have our props, we have our actors, we have everything. So now we start production. So let's say you're a PA, new to the field. This is your first movie. What is going on, Tiffany?
So as a PA, someone who's been a PA for quite some time.
A production assistant.
Okay, so for indie films, I like to be on set sometimes like before call. Like you will probably be scheduled, your call time will be scheduled probably an hour before the rest of the crew, because you get to set and if you're on indie and there's no crafty person, you're setting up crafty, you're setting up the crafty table and all that stuff. You are probably helping the ADs.
So hold on, before we get deeper, let's try to simplify the film slang. So crafty is like the snacks, ADs, assistant director.
Yeah.
So that way
Sorry,
people aren't
I'm
lost.
bad at explaining things. I just breeze through explanations. Yeah. So you are basically running around and making sure, or asking department heads if they need help with anything, and if they do, you help them. But you're pretty much like making sure that the production team is flowing. Sorry, I'm like really blanking right now.
No,
because
it's okay.
because the last thing I did that was like a PA, I like did so many different things, so I'm like trying to remember exactly what my day-to-day was.
Oh yeah. So I mean that's the fun thing. Well, I think it's the fun thing about film.
It's so different every day, because you'll have to be running around setting up tents for like Video Village if it's outside, and which Video Village is where like everybody like kind of like watches in on the screens, like when the cameras are rolling, you're watching like these little screens, and you're like the director and like everybody's like watching to make sure the frame is good. And like, that's where like equipment kind of chills out sometimes. And the PAs are just like basically running around and getting everything like set up before people get there. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that correctly? Well, I'm trying to think. It's so all over the place sometimes.
Yeah, no, especially in an independent movie, PAs are like the anything people. So you learn, you assist everyone where you can. You are the oil that keeps the gears turning. Cassie, did you want to did you have anything to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, the nice things about PAs is that there are PAs in pretty much every department. So, like, you can be like a director's assistant, and essentially that's a PA whose specific job is to help the director. Like, there are production PAs, so people who work in the production office, helping out there and doing copying and making copies for everybody in terms of scripts and call sheets and all that jazz. There are camera PAs. So if you're interested in being in the camera department, you can definitely start as a PA in any department to be able to get the opportunity to kind of learn what the I guess higher tiered jobs are and what they do and kind of what the differences are, because they've got PAs in camera, sound, art, costumes, hair and makeup, special effects, stunts. There's got to be people who are able to help with those different departments and help them run with kind of I don't want to say smaller jobs, but the more running around, we call them gophers, both in terms of a person who goes for something and also the animal of like
wow, dehumanizing.
Well, they pop in and out is more of what it is. Like they're you pop in and out of each different area, and that's, if you are standing in one spot for too long, you probably should have something that you should be doing. If you're sitting, there's probably something that could be getting done right now. So But yeah, they're a great entry into any department, really.
If you got time to lean, you got time to make a movie.
You got time to make coffee for the director for the 8th time today to feed their caffeine addiction.
Oh yeah, that's RIP directors and their caffeine addictions. But yeah, we have our camera department. We have our grip department, grip is for like the equipment of, the light stands, camera, dolly carts, all that heavy equipment stuff. You got the electric department, which handles the electricity, powering the lights, powering other things. And then and also in charge of lighting, we have the gaffer, who basically is in charge of the look of the lighting, alongside with the director of photography, and basically knows the more technical aspects of the wattage and stuff like that. And then you have the costumes, hair and makeup, production staff, and I feel like locations is, I guess, technically part of production staff. But am I missing something else? I feel like I'm missing something else.
Art department.
Art department.
Yeah, it's very important. Without art department, you have no background in essentially.
I started out, my first PA job was, the first couple PA jobs I had were art PAs. And that was really nice because as an art PA, you were assigned to whatever the production designer or art director tells you to do, which is basically like you're either set dressing or you're running out and getting props, or you're fixing props, or you're making them, or you are doing something that is set dress wise that the art director needs you to do.
It's a great eye in the sky kind of job too, because you're a part of what's happening on set, but and you're like doing things, but you kind of get an opportunity to kind of see how things work together too as a part of art, because art is influenced so much by what does the camera see, what does lighting see, what does the director actually want the person to do in the space. It definitely incorporates and uses again, lots of different aspects. I think that's one of the cool things about filmmaking is that it all is so highly interconnected. Yeah. And another important part of production, Kevin, that we should probably talk about is what do producers do? Also,
yes. Yes.
I was like, we forgot sound. No.
Oh, yeah. The sound is what separates an amateur film from a professional film. For sure.
For sure.
People are so much more willing to let go of camera inaccuracies and oh no, something's out of focus. It's artistic. If something doesn't sound good, it just doesn't sound good. Y'all are so important and we applaud you in what you do.
I'm sorry I forgot you. Anyways, producers.
Yeah. Producers are important because they're a part of the process from the beginning and bring it again all the way to the end.
Right.
Helping to manage the needs of the client or the studio or the people who have a say in what's happening, and almost working as a protection shield of the director as well to protect them from some of that stuff.
Right. The way I've had the role described to me from another producer is that essentially they're the ones that do everything until they're able to hire someone to do the work for them.
Right.
So they are there from the beginning and they hire everyone who's working on the set. So if it's a super indie set, let's say, for example, I'm trying to become a producer because I'm trying to learn every aspect of the film process. So I try to be a jack of all trades. So when I work producing a film, if someone doesn't show up on the job, I'm able to fill in that role if need be. So essentially the producer does that, either fills the role themselves or manages to find someone else to fill that role. And, they are the head of the production, in charge of all, the top of the line. They're the ones that hired all the department heads, and then department heads hired everyone in their department. And it's a hierarchy for sure.
And then next down in that hierarchy would be the assistant director, probably. There are different levels to all
rulers of the set.
There's different levels of kind of all of these jobs for people who may not know. We mentioned kind of the heads of departments for these, but like, for example, in camera, there's the director of photography, there's the camera operator who's right underneath that, there's the first assistant camera who's right underneath that, and then there's second assistant camera, and then your camera PS, blah, blah, blah. Same thing for...
Camera utility.
Yeah, camera utility, DIT, which is digital... Oh, God.
Digital image transfer.
Yep, that one. Whew, brains. But yeah, but it also works the same way for like assistant directing. So like producers are basically people who manage the like behind the scenes stuff and what's happening offset. And then as soon as you're talking about who's in charge on set, that would be the assistant director. There's an often people often think that directors are in charge of the set. They are not. Their job is communicators to actors and to tell the actors what they need to do and communicate their vision to the director of photography and to the assistant director and even sometimes the gaffer too. But sometimes even the DP handles talking to the gaffer or the best boy.
Yeah, they're the artsy person. They're the one with the vision. They tell they talk to the actors and they communicate with the rest of the like you said, they communicate with the rest of the team about what their vision is and how artsy they want it to be to tell their story. But they're not actually in charge of anything technically.
Yeah, they're the guidepost. They're the thing up on the wall being like, here's what we're going for. And then the assistant director is the one who's like, all right, I see what you're wanting to do. How do we make that happen? All right, so I need to make sure that you want to get this shot that is this dolly move. So it's going to take time to set up the track for the dolly. We're also going to need an additional dolly operator for that. And we're going to need XYZ equipment. Yeah, sometimes you need to worry about costs, and then sometimes you're just like, producer, you worry about this.
Oh, producer.
But yeah, and then the first assistant director is in charge of like making sure that the schedule is in order and that there's enough time on set and to manage what's happening on set. So like if the DP says, "Oh, I'm gonna need 15 minutes to set up the shot," you go, "Okay, you have 15 minutes. I will see you in 15 minutes."
And of course, this isn't to downplay the importance of the director.
Oh no.
And like how, people, there's the common joke in the industry is that there's only two positions that you don't need experience for, PA and director. Because for director, you don't need to know the technical aspects, although it's so much better when they do.
Yeah.
Trust me. But if you really like the artistic vision of a film, the credit usually does go towards the director.
Yeah. And then, and then with the other levels of assistant director too, they kind of help the first AD accomplish what their goals are. Same with everybody else who's kind of lower on the totem pole in their departments too. Because like the second AD, it's their job to build out the call sheets, which is based off of the schedule that they worked on with the first AD, and to help manage that kind of stuff. And thinking forward, wow, the first AD is on set actually dealing with the set and what is happening there to keep them on track for the day.
Can you tell that we have a lot of experience in production?
It is what we enjoy. It is what we do.
It's how we get our money, essentially.
Very true.
But yeah, so in this production, usually, and depending on what kind of movie you're working on, usually it lasts between 3 weeks to 2 months. Usually, it's usually surprising if it goes past 2 months. It's usually that it makes sense for like a big, huge production. But for the independent films, it's usually you want to go like max 4 weeks, if depending on your budget.
Yeah.
And then you usually work 12-hour days. And then you get lunch after 6 hours. But don't worry, you can eat throughout the whole thing. You get crafty, which is snacks that are just available to you, and drinks. It's 60 hours a week, but you make, as long as the movie is cool at the end, it's worth it, I think. Yeah.
It's a lot of work. It is if you do not love what you do, it is absolutely the hardest job in the entire world. Like, we get up before dawn, we go to bed like way late.
Well, we don't always wake up before dawn. That's just if it's every day is the same schedule in the morning.
That is true. Sometimes you have overnight shoots, and daily shooting schedules usually start at 10 hours. So you're already working 2 hours beyond the minimum of the 40-hour work week that most people do. So you already have to be prepared to work an extra 2 hours a day. And then, you know, most shoots often do a 12-hour day. So if you're keeping up with the math, that's an additional 4 hours. So it's definitely something you have to do for the love of the game. But it's also the responsibility of production to make sure that they are taking care of their crew and making sure that they have enough time to like go home and sleep and do normal people things like laundry.
It's teamwork all the way up and all the way down.
Yeah. And one of the ways that they can do this is because they feed you on set, like what they were talking, like what you guys were saying about Crafty, and there's catering as well usually. So usually you get a breakfast first meal, and then you get a lunch. Actually, though, I think technically breakfast is its own thing, and first meal is lunch.
Yeah.
And then second meal is
it's always
dinner.
nice when they do provide breakfast, so that way it gives you more time to sleep.
Yeah. Especially if you're working your crew hard, like feed them food. A fed crew is a happy crew, and a happy crew.
At the very least, if you can't pay them a lot, give them food.
Give
like,
them
that
food.
is probably the most important thing to keep your crew happy, besides letting them go home and sleep.
Yeah. I mean, I think those are the two things, right? Like it's like feeding them and then respecting their hours and their time, like not expecting them to work insane hours. Because it's hard when you like feel like you're on this time constraint budget, but you have to realize like if you're not going to keep to the time that you said that you were going to keep to, then like something has to be cut. And it's we can't do that at the expense of the health of our crew. We do that at the expense of the project. Sorry, but
the three pillars of filmmaking: time, money, and quality. If you had to sacrifice anything, you have to sacrifice quality. You have to always respect people's time, and you do not have infinite money.
Yeah.
So moving on from production, we now have post-production. So the movie is done, it's all shot, and now we enter Zach's favorite part of the filmmaking process, editing the movie and getting it all nice and shiny for the distribution. Cassie, the the talking stick. Because it goes to you.
It's been passed. I have the torch. Yeah. Well, this is definitely something I have experience in because, as I said, I worked in like a production house. So like we did everything from beginning to end. And also my husband works in VFX and post-production and animation and all that jazz. So
that is so cool.
If I sound smart, it's because of him. He has made me very smart about this. I often get like knowledge dumps and I'm like, wow, which is very helpful. But it's important to remember that post-production and VFX starts in pre-production. You have to plan what you're going to do in pre-production so that you can shoot it correctly in production, so that you can get the best out of your VFX that you possibly can. Because oftentimes that includes like putting visual markers onto things so that you can track it easier in post-production.
Yeah, so having a VFX supervisor does really make or break how the VFX look at the end. So
hugely.
You definitely, you don't want to be like, oh, I'll just look up a tutorial after I'm done shooting. Like, no, you want to look up a tutorial before you start shooting. So that way you know how you need to shoot the footage.
Yeah, definitely. And it's important to remember that there are kind of two aspects to, kind of three if you really divide it up, but to post-production, because there's the actual editing of the project, you know, the cutting together of the scenes and the shots, you know, and again, these are things that you have planned in pre-production and that you use the slate in production to keep track of all those shots so that you can then, when you get to editing, you know, oh, I know that shot A1 is meant to be used here at the top of this scene. And it makes the editing process a lot easier and quicker because you know what you have, especially if you've been keeping track and have a good script supervisor, another so important role. Oh my gosh. Thank you to all your script supervisors out there. So hard of a job. It's so hard. But really helps in post-production for sure. And for just the editing process, and VFX would be a second part of that post-production process. But then also sound and music, because you have to edit the dialogue and make the dialogue sound great. But then also, any additional, we call it Foley, which is when you make sounds that were not originally shot on set. And you do them later, and then you have to then edit and add those into the project. And that's definitely a huge part of that post-production process. Again, the post-production process that begins in pre-production.
Yeah.
Thinking about how those go together.
You have to, it's a big giant plan you got to put together. And so it's like, I want to say it's kind of like outlining your story. You have to know, where you need to start, and then you know where you need to end, and then you got to figure out what all the middle part is. And same thing with writing a story, the middle part is always the hardest.
I always say that like the creative editing part of a film is like just as important as like the writing. And there's always like, you write the film and then you make the film, and that's also, production's also like a form of storytelling in itself. And then the editing is like the third and final part of that storytelling. It's like they're all their own processes, yet all so connected at the same time. So I want, like, one of my dream jobs is to be like a Foley artist one day. Hopefully that'd be really cool. So I'm like slowly starting to like, my interest is like gearing towards like the editing world.
Clapping coconuts together to make it sound like horse hooves.
Yes.
Thank you, Monty Python, for spoiling our secrets.
Whoa, no. Postmodernism.
The veil is lifted.
No. Quick, put the curtain back.
Yeah, put it back.
So post-production, usually it kind of depends on it depends on the film you're working on, how long it lasts. A VFX heavy film stays in post-production for a while. VFX meaning visual effects. So usually special effects are done during production. Visual effects are done on a computer in post-production. So you got the CGI and all that stuff. And sometimes it goes through the editing process. You're like, oh, we need to reshoot some things, or like to get some pickup shots of like some inserts of close-ups of things, objects here and there. Sometimes, most time actors aren't really needed, but sometimes you just you need to get something. You just forgot to get one specific shot of like a door or something like that. And this is where, like Tiffany says, this is the final draft of the story. And then when it's done, it enters distribution. Distribution is the final stage of making a film. It is where you find someone to sell your movie for you. You're like, okay, you try to get it to the theater, or you try to get it on Netflix, or you try to get it on Hulu or whatever, what have you. Distribution, you have to find someone, make that deal, and then hopefully your film does well. And distribution is also in charge of the marketing as well. So you gotta, and then, if you're making your own film, you do have to be careful of shady distributors. There are many horror stories out there that you can find. So you want to find a distributor that you trust, that has a good track record, and is willing to and has faith in your product as well, enough to market it and champion it. Yeah,
definitely. It's definitely good. It's important to read your contracts always. And that's for every position that you take, every project that you're on. But especially with distribution, it's important to know, like, are they asking, in order to distribute your project, are they asking for all of the rights to the film? Like, do you lose access to any of that? Like, where do they plan to distribute it? Like, is it better to, go direct to DVD, or go to a film festival, or put it in a movie theater, or, XYZ? What kind of marketing money are they willing to put into it? Because, like, oftentimes, especially mostly for like big budget projects, that could be like upwards of 50%, if not more, of the budget of the film is dedicated towards marketing, in particular those like larger projects and such like that. Like every time you see a YouTube ad, that's paid for. Every time you see a poster or a billboard, that's all paid for. Like where those billboards and those posters are, like you can get better spots and like you have to pay more for those better spots. But yeah, definitely. And those rights can change hands too, like because they can distribution house can sell your rights or sell the distribution rights to other places. So just things to keep in mind.
For sure.
I was gonna add, and this is in the realm of distribution, and this is just something that I've like recently caught on to. Depending on the distribution company or like the marketing company you have, I guess this isn't really the same as distribution, but more so for marketing. Like, be careful about what marketing team you pick because they can really make or break the, the selling of your film, especially if it's an indie film and you are trying to get it to like a theater. And depending on how they cut the trailers and market the film can really depend on, that could really alter the success of the film.
Yeah, how they make the poster look. Like, I think The Father was a victim of bad marketing, wasn't it?
Which movie? The Father?
The Father.
Yeah. It was. I don't really know too much of the details. All I know is that like nobody knew the movie existed. No one knew this movie existed up until a couple
with Anthony Hopkins and Olivia Colman.
Yeah, it's really good, really good movie. But it kind of snuck in at the last moment, right before eligibility for award season. And now it's like nominated for Oscars, but nobody's seen it because it was released so late. People in other countries couldn't see it either. I think we didn't get it till a couple weeks ago, I think. I was lucky to see it with a screener like a couple months ago, but like nobody knew what that movie was, or they didn't know when it was going to be. But also that's also kind of because of COVID that absolutely screwed everything up. There's a horror movie called Saint Maud that what I think was probably supposed to come out around this time last year. And then the distribution process for that was so delayed. Yeah. They wanted it and they wanted it in the theater, which was what happened to a lot of films this year. If like anyone's noticed, like they kept pushing them back because they wanted them in theater, and then eventually they'd have to release them video on demand because or like to purchase because it just wasn't going to happen. But there is the most recent film that I can think of before COVID that had this sort of thing was the recent remake of Black Christmas. I shouldn't even say it was a remake, the reimagining of, because it's not the same story at all, but I love that movie. I thought it was great, but the marketing for that film was kind of terrible because if you watch the trailer in the theater like months before, it seems as though they give the whole movie away. They don't, but the way they edited it, which is why editing is so important and can really just reveal stuff. And the trailer was it felt so revealing that people didn't want to see it. They were like, oh well, you gave the whole movie away. They didn't, but the way they edited the trailer turned people off. And so I walked up to one of like my biggest theaters in my area and there were 4 people there opening day. And it was like, okay. And then it got really bad reviews too. But I really liked it, but it was just, it's all about, once you start like kind of postering the movie out into the world, and it's all about the way you do it. You really have to market it very like strategically and specifically and make sure it's getting to the right target audience. And social media plays a big part in that as well, I think.
Yeah. And then a joke that I always kind of refer to is that I never judge a movie by its trailer. I always judge a trailer by its movie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I watched the movie, then I watched the trailer, and then it's like, oh, they didn't represent this well at all, or sometimes they did do it well.
Right.
One of my favorite trailers for a movie is First Love, which is a Japanese Yakuza film very recently. The movie's pretty fun, but the trailer, the way it edits together, like it still properly represents the story, but makes it even better. Like I feel like the trailer was better than the movie, but in a good way. Not that the movie is bad, but it's just more like it heightens the experience.
Yeah, I've experienced that the last couple years. I'm like, why is the trailer better than the movie?
Yeah.
But I guess another example I can throw out there is Jennifer's Body. I think we all know about that one, but I can touch on that one really quickly. It was in terms of marketing, that movie was marketed towards young men. And it's not a movie for young men at all. It's a movie for women and like teenage girls. And that was marketed towards people who liked Diablo Cody's films, like Juno and like her, and it's not like Juno at all. So those test screenings, which is test screenings is part of distribution too. You gather random people to come see. You don't really tell people what the movie really is about. You just kind of show up. They do these test screenings and you fill out these surveys at the end and give them to, whoever's running the test screening, and they bring it back to the production team and all that. And you figure out what people liked and didn't like about the film. But like, that's another one where it was really worst case scenario. And it got tanked because, whatever company they went with just straight up was like banking on the fact of how hot Megan Fox was. So they were going to steer it towards people who, would go for that, who are big Transformers fans and all that stuff. And that's not what that movie was made for at all. So I just always think that that's so interesting.
Yeah. And then speaking of test screenings, the director of Shazam has a YouTube channel called Pony Smasher, which is where he got his start in the film industry. But he has a video of talking about test screenings that I'll link in the description. It's really informative, really fun.
Yeah, cool. I'll check that out.
Yep. And so as we wrap up, are there any closing thoughts you guys have?
Go out and make movies.
Yes.
Like we talk heavily about the process in here, and I hope that we'll do more episodes where we break down this process even more. But really, especially if you're just starting out and like you want to learn how this all works, go out, make movies, especially make movies with your friends. Like you're going to make mistakes. It's just going to happen. You're not going to do your best all the time, but you can certainly try and have a good time. Make movies. They're fun to make. They're fun to watch. They're fun to break down and do what we're doing, where we're doing fun film theory things, but go out and make the dang thing.
You know what? I think it's so cool now that like young teenagers and like young people today like have all these like devices that have like editing software built into them. Like you have like, like everyone in the film and like, especially at film school, everyone always laughed at iMovie, but I'm like, no, like it's seriously like, it's good for people who aren't super into editing. It's really easy, makes it really easy. And then you can like move on to Final Cut or like Premiere if you really like editing software. I learned how to edit on like Windows Movie Maker when I was like 12. Like it's
somewhere.
It's so, and then it's like you realize how fun it is and you look up tutorials and you can like teach yourself how to edit, or you can like edit in your phone now. And a lot of people, I'll just throw it out there. I think it's really cool that a lot of people are learning how to edit videos via like TikTok. Like it kind of started with Vine, but I think it's more so evolved with TikTok. The things that people make on there, I know it's like there's a lot of effects built into the app, but a lot of people get really creative with it and they know how to like manipulate all those little tools and stuff. I just think we're gonna have the next generation is gonna be, I think, and a lot of editors in general, just in media in general.
The best equipment is the equipment you have access to.
Absolutely.
Like, it's easy to get disillusioned by like, I don't have access to the newest red camera or
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
More Ks do not make things better.
Whatever you have access to, use it. And like, you're totally right in that like TikTok is a great example of great storytelling. Like you've got a limited especially with constraints. The more constraints you have, the more creative you have to be. And like with TikTok, you have between 30 and 60 seconds to actually accomplish what you want to say and do. And so do what you can with that.
Yep.
We had I think Tiffany and I actually had a professor who loved Vine because of the 6-second storytelling. I can't remember who it was, but he was just like, oh my gosh, stories in 6 seconds. It's amazing. I'm like, yeah, he's right.
Yeah.
Was it Hong? Was it Hong? Maybe.
I think it was Metz.
Oh, probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Probably.
It's condensed storytelling. It's taking a feature film and trying to like be like, what is the most important pieces of this to accurately share what I want to share. For sure. It's so good.
Now, little cinematography tip. Lighting is more important than the camera video resolution.
Yes.
So.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you for saying that.
If you shoot it in 4K, it can still look like garbage because of bad lighting.
Yep.
People fail to realize that, but yeah, that's really important.
I've shot movies in 1080 and people would look at me, it was like, wow, you shot that in 4K, right? I'm like, nope. I just knew how to light it.
And also, you don't need seriously expensive lighting equipment either. You can easily make do with what you have, and if it's really good, no one will ask you or question it.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of tutorials on lighting on YouTube for like Indie Hustle, Film Riot, especially. You know, you can just always look them up and just check them out. Yep. And also, there's a book I want to recommend about if you are interested in starting your first film and want to know more about the process. Robert Rodriguez, who directed Spy Kids, Sin City, Desperado. He has a book called Rebel Without a Crew about how he made his first movie, and he did it one-man crew style. I read it before I went to film school, and it actually helped me a lot with producing my own films during school. So I highly recommend it. It's a great read, and you can find it for pretty cheap. I'll have a link to that in the description. And on that note, this has been Breaking Into Cinema. We'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss the movie Brick, the 2005 film by Rian Johnson. You can follow, this is a show on the Committed Critics channel, so you can follow us at Committed Critters, CommittedCrits. My name is Kevin. You can follow me at Author Klau on Twitter. That is AUTHORKLAU.
And I'm Tiffany McLaughlin. You could read my movie reviews at crpwrites.com.
And I'm Cassie Balschmidt. You can follow me at Cassie Story, CassiesStory on Twitter and Instagram.
You can support us on Patreon, linked below in the description. And special thanks to Zach, who loves the editing, and Jordan for being our sound engineer and creating our music intro. Thank you very much, and see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.